Good evening, members. Reverend Crawford Logan will say prayers. Let's pray. Please be seated. Sorry. All right, good evening, members. Thank you, good evening. Item number 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Bush, Councillor John Brown, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Gray, Councillor Cawthron, Councillor Broderick and Councillor King. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the 23rd of January, pages 3 to 14. Any things to those meetings? Agreed? Thank you very much. I'll just ask the Chief Executive Officer to say a few words before item number 4.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just read out a statement? Before we move on to item 4 on the agenda, can I please remind all members of the annual guidance for the Budget and Council Tax meeting issued by the Monitoring Officer on the 24th of January 2018. Members, you're not required to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest for setting the council tax. However, if any member is in arrears of council tax by at least 2 months, including liabilities to another council outside of this district, they must declare this fact, and although a member could speak on the item, they cannot vote on the budget tonight. This is a requirement of Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, and failure to comply with these provisions would be a criminal offence. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Okay, we have none. Item number 5, announcements by the Chairman. I'd like to welcome Mr. Lodge to his first meeting here in his official new capacity. Whilst it's big shoes to fill with the Mr. Brown departing, I'm sure you'll do ever so well, and we welcome you all. Thank you. Item number 6, announcements by the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman. I formally report that on 29th of January 2018, and in accordance with the wishes of the Leader of the Conservative Group, I exercised my delegated powers and appointed Councillor Watson to serve on the Licensing General Purposes Subcommittee in the stead of Councillor Massey. This announcement is for members' information only. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 7, statements by the Leader of the Council. Councillor Stock.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a statement. As members will recall, this council recently applied to the High Court for permission to judicially review the planning inspector's decision on the Sladbridge Lane appeal, whereby he granted planning permission for the development of 132 homes. We've received notification from the planning court that unfortunately permission has not been granted to seek a judicial review, and the council has been ordered to pay the Secretary of State's costs. The judge's reasons for her decision, taken without holding a hearing, are that there had been no error of law and consideration of the planning merits and planning judgments exercised by inspectors are not appropriate for judicial analysis. Our external counsel has reviewed the judge's refusal and confirmed that whilst disappointing, the Planning Court have over the last 6 to 12 months been very dismissive of any claims which stray into the planning merits at all, even if there is an arguable error of approach or law. There is no increased prospect of success in persuading the Court that an arguable error of law exists by proceeding further. When we decided to take legal action to challenge the inspector's decision, it was done based on solid reasons, and it is unfortunate that on this occasion we have not been successful. The inspector's decision was based on the specific information presented to the inquiry about this particular application, and I am determined that it will not alter the Council's resolve to present robustly the housing land supply position and defend its decisions as necessary. I have requested, Chairman, that officers circulate a detailed briefing note as soon as is practicable, providing more information on this case to all members. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 8, statement by members of the Cabinet. We have none. Item number 9, report of the Cabinet A1, General Fund Budget and Council Tax 2018-19. Councillor Stock.
Thank you, Chairman. So I shall be moving the budget. Just before, Chairman, if you'll indulge me just for a second, I just wanted to thank the portfolio holder responsible for finance, which is Carlo, who's done a sterling job in really getting to grips with local government finances, which is a very intricate and difficult thing to do, and he really has got a fantastic grasp of it. But for some reason in local government, it's me as leader that gets up to do the speech instead of the cabinet member responsible for finance. I don't quite know why we do it like that. They don't do that in Westminster, where the Chancellor gets up and does the budget. But hey, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing for me personally. We'll see in a minute, I expect. But I'd also like to thank our officers, particularly our finance officers, and in particular, of course, Richard Barrett, who Section 151 officer and Head of Financial Services. And I was saying to colleagues earlier, actually, that Richard had the enviable task of following the person I thought was a really superb 151 officer, was Karen Meath, who used to do the job before him and who he served under. And she was fantastic and approachable and friendly, but resolute and determined and very steely when she needed to be. But I have to say Richard has really stepped up to the plate, and we are very, very fortunate to have a superb Section 151 officer who is leading our finances at a very, very difficult and challenging time for local government. So thank you, Richard, and your team. Chairman, without further ado, you'll recall when I introduced the budget last year, I explained that our underlying principle when we put together the budget each year was always to protect frontline services wherever possible. Up until this year, our focus has been on working more efficiently and reducing our staffing and overhead costs alongside modest changes to service delivery. This approach has seen in excess of £13 million being taken out of the budget over recent years, with only minimal impact on frontline services. I also went on to say last year that given the scale of savings required over the coming 2 years, that line would be increasingly difficult to hold. About 9 to 10 months ago, when we sat down to discuss the budget for 2018-19, so when we started to plan this budget, we were presented with a savings target of £3.4 million over 2 years. In the context of protecting frontline services, we had a choice. Accept what felt like a bit of a fait accompli, given the traditional short-term approach to the budget the local authorities normally take, or to think quite differently. And Chairman, I'm glad we were brave enough to choose the latter course, as otherwise the budget presented tonight would have reflected the inevitable reduction in services. I am proud to say that there are no service reductions proposed within the budget in front of us tonight, something that many councils are unlikely to be able to say this year. As we all already know, the pace of the reductions in revenue support grant from the government has meant that local authorities have not had the space and time to become self-sufficient. However, this council has always made it clear that it is committed to growing its own income via regeneration and economic development initiatives, for example. We therefore needed a way to create the time and space to allow our local income to grow. And even if we are only partially successful, It would give the Council a fighting chance to emerge from the current difficult financial environment we currently face in good shape with only minimal reductions in service provision, compared with a more traditional alternative of making significant and short-term cuts to services. The longer-term approach to the forecast that we adopted will enable us time to identify various actions that can be developed to deliver the underlying income growth required to offset changes in expenditure. If we get this right, we aim to be delivering budget surpluses in the not-too-distant future, which we would then be able to reinvest in services. The budget presented tonight achieves the first step within this new longer-term approach by delivering a balanced budget with only minimal use of the forecast risk fund. And, as I've just stated, there are no reductions in services proposed. Chairman, whilst mentioning the forecast risk fund, it's important to highlight at this point that we chose to set aside £1.434 million from the outturn position in 2016-17 to underwrite the financial risks going forward. This is therefore paying off, and in fact, we've been able to contribute an additional £454,000 to this fund from the 2017-18 revised budget, so we can move on to the 2019-20 budget over the coming months with growing confidence. You may think financial survival is enough to occupy our time over the next few years, but we have also taken the opportunity to make significant financial commitments to a number of projects. We have identified in excess of £7.5 million to fund a number of projects, such as £2 million for the garden communities, £1 million for Harwich Public Realm Works, £500,000 for housing in Jaywick Sands, £1.5 million for office transformation and channel shift, over £2 million on regeneration and economic development projects, and nearly £600,000 on repairs to key assets. And these are not promises to fund projects in the future if we can raise the money. These are cash-backed with the money already in the bank. And on top of the above, we've also set aside £1.5 million to support the cost of the recharging of the new beaches from Clacton to Holland. So we don't need to find this money over the coming years, we've already got it. Although not part of the general fund budget tonight, we are also investing over £6 million every year in our housing stock, which is despite the government requiring us to reduce the rent we charge by 1% a year over 4 years. We want investment to also support our ongoing financial position, so we are looking for a return on our money to provide income or to reduce cost pressures that may emerge in the later years of the forecast. We are therefore being as commercial as we can be within the increasingly frustrating rules set out by the government. Now, Chairman, members will have heard me repeat this mantra many times before, and I do not apologise for doing so again. If the government wants us to be financially self-sufficient, and by effectively scrapping the revenue support grant, we have to assume that they do, then they really should allow us to do just that. Parliament needs to remove the legislative shackles which currently forbid us from being entrepreneurial or innovative in so many ways, and which restrict how we can operate as an organisation. We have in this country one of the most centralised systems of government anywhere in the world, and all I'm proposing is that Westminster just needs to trust local councils to know what is best and to do what is right in their own local area. But, Chairman, coming back to this budget, let me also mention redesigning service delivery. I recall in the past the cynical view being expressed that this phrase was just shorthand for cutting services. But let me use our waste and recycling service as an example to explain why that is fundamentally not the case. Our existing contract has a break clause at year 7, with the option to extend for up to a further 7 years. The cost of providing waste and refuse services has increased greatly over the life of our existing contract, such that if we did nothing and just carried on with the same service for a further 7 years, we would be looking at increases in costs of between £300,000 and £400,000 year on year. The only way to find that kind of money would either be a massive hike in council tax or by making cuts to other services. And, Chairman, neither of those options is acceptable to me. So what we're doing, and believe me it's not easy, is looking at how we can find a less expensive way to collect rubbish and recyclables, a way in which we actually hope to provide what people regard as an improved service. And we're currently working on finalising options which can deliver on those objectives whilst preventing as far as possible the need to make cuts to other services within the council to pay for it. And that is what redesigning service delivery is all about. Being creative, thinking differently and doing more with less. Another good example of where we are taking a positive yet pragmatic view is when we allocate funding to particular service areas in the budget. The Council is committed to providing the same level of funding year on year to deliver specific areas of the budget. However, we recognise that the same amount of money may not buy as much as it did in the past. Providing real-time increases in funding across the diverse range of services that the Council provides is unlikely to be possible given the reductions in government funding. So we just need to be honest about this. However, what I'm sure about is that this will spur us into continuing to find different ways of delivering our services, a challenge we've lived up to in the past and one we will continue to meet. I think we all agree that this Council continues to punch above its weight. I see members and officers working really closely together at this Council to make this possible. I see a genuine passion from members and officers alike to deliver for our residents, businesses and visitors, something that is so clear to me and demonstrated week in, week out. And it's something that we should not simply take for granted, as I believe it is one of the key things that sets us apart from other councils up and down the country, and it will see us through this challenging period. Once we are fully financially self-sufficient, there will be no stopping us. But we do need to keep laying down those foundations each year. We need to keep developing our ideas and have a mix of things up our sleeve to keep delivering against the forecast. Sometimes we'll be doing this in partnerships, and sometimes we'll be doing it alone. In terms of looking past 2018-19 and the budgets that lay ahead, I generally want to include the views of as many members as possible. Hopefully you will recall the promise I made to all members recently when I asked you all to put forward things that you may like to see in the budget, or conversely remove from the budget. Please do take me up on that offer and feed your thoughts and ideas into the forecast and budgeting setting process in the year ahead. And on that note, I see we have an amendment on the table before us. It's a bit... the proposal here is that £100,000 be transferred from the Fit for Purpose budget and into the Big Society budget. It's not what we'd been planning to do right at this stage, hence it wasn't in the budget, but actually it's something we were planning on doing, something bigger and better than that in the coming months. So I'm actually going to, in the spirit of the fact that we've got that motion in advance, I'm quite happy to take that and absorb that into this budget, and that we actually set up something that's bigger, even bigger and better than the Big Society Fund. But initially I'm happy to accept the wording of that budget with the plan that it only goes bigger and better, and I welcome the support of the Labour Group for the Big Society Fund. So, Chairman, before we hear from other members, I just want to repeat, really, how proud I am to be able to present the budget tonight with no proposed cuts to services and with over £7.5 million of investment in the district plan. Chairman, this budget tonight before us epitomises the ethos and spirit that underpins so much of what we are about at this council. It is about doing more with less by being innovative and creative. It is about facing down financial pressures with a dauntless positivity and confident optimism. It is about coming together for the greater good, because I see that despite our many and varied political backgrounds, we do want to deliver the very best we can for the residents of this great district of Tendring. Chairman, I strongly commend the motion to Council, and I call on all members to support the 2018-19 budget that's being proposed and to vote in favour of it tonight. Thank you.
Any member wishing to speak? Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just have some clarification that the Leader is accepting the proposed amendment as part of the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Stock.
Sorry if I didn't make that clear, but absolutely yes.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, can I join the Leader in his appreciation and support for the staff of this council, because I think, as we all know, without the goodwill and loyalty of the staff over these really hard years, we wouldn't be surviving and wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. With what they've had to put up with lots less staff, lot less resources, pay freezes, and everything else that's had to go with it, they've still carried on and they've still delivered a first-class service amongst themselves. So I think we should appreciate all of that they're doing for this council. Can I say to the Leader, there is a third option when he talks about the waste contract and how much we've got to save. The third option, he said two, the third option is that his government gives local government the funding they need to actually carry on and run services. Because as I've said in the Cabinet meeting when we met, this is the worst of a bad deal, because at the end of the day he says there's no cuts, but we know very well from this 10-year forecast that it's £300,000 cuts a year. And on top of that, we don't know where those £300,000 cuts are coming. So although we are here on this, and I'm pleased it's accepted our amendment of the Big Society, because the one thing we were concerned with is that the Big Society funds dried up, and we were waiting for the lottery fund, which is in the process of being established. The money wouldn't be there to help these much-needed organisations. But as I've said, I think this is the best of a bad deal because of this £300,000 cuts, and we don't even know where it is. But what I will say as a leader of my group, we will be supporting this, reluctantly, the budget tonight, because of the money that we see going into those growth areas, the money that's desperately needed for Jaywick and Harwich, the £1 million public realm for Harwich. We will be supporting it. But what we will be doing is laying a marker down here now that we are very, very unhappy with facing a £300,000 cut and not even knowing what those cuts actually mean to the residents of Tendron. So I say that, like I said last year, we will defend and we will complain and we will fight anything that we see is going to damage and give worse services to our residents. And I also want to raise the concern, and he said about local government funding cuts. We are heading, as I said again at the Cabinet meeting, local government is heading for the cliff edge. It's his government who's actually taking the money away and should have been replacing that money with the business rate retention scheme, which now doesn't come in till 2020. We are going to see a funding gap. All councils, including this council, are going to see a massive funding gap between now and 2020. That's if that retention comes in. And we're now told that the 100% retention is now only 75%. And we're also told that we could have more and more responsibilities put on the council on top of that retention. Nobody knows what extra priorities and responsibilities we will have to have. And we already know the constraints and the pressures on our local residents. We know that deprivation across this district is only getting worse. And when I look at the budget that I'm facing next week, where members opposite there will probably be voting for it, and the cuts we're seeing from county level, which will affect our residents here, £30 million on adult social care, money cuts for the third sector, more cuts for children's services. It only can get worse and worse for our residents. So we need to make sure that we watch where the knife goes in our services. And we will stand by our residents and we will fight anything that we don't believe they should have imposed on them. So as I round up, we will support the budget, but we reluctantly do it. And we want and we demand to see where these cuts will be. Because he just said, and I'm just quickly winding up, he did say that there was no cuts in this budget. That's wrong. That's wrong, and it's misleading to the public. Because it's in the budget book. There are £300,000 cuts coming to the residents of Tendron. So we should see them and should see them soon. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that I fully support the budget this evening. I fully support everything that our leader has said. I also wish to compliment the officers for all their hard work. And also, I think My colleagues on this side of the floor have done an extremely good job working with officers, as I'm sure the opposition have. But I do have to put on record how incredibly disappointed I am on behalf of Walton residents that the Cabinet made a decision to remove £90,000 worth of investment on the Millennium Square in Walton, based on not even 1% of the population, and that I have, as a Conservative councillor, received an awful lot of anger and bitterness as a result of that. So I'm just putting on record that, please, I respect the cuts. I think we're doing an amazing job, but I don't want Walton to suffer as a result of it. I want the cuts to be fairly distributed across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Carlo Guglielmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really pleased to hear that Councillor Henderson is supporting a budget, and I'm really pleased to hear that he's supporting their own amendment, which, if I remember rightly, they voted against when we introduced the Big Society at the time that there was not very much money to manoeuvre with. So it's really great to have the support. And I struggle to see where the cuts are that he refers to are actually highlighted. There's been savings there. There have been prudent savings made in every department. There are budgets which have not been fully utilised, and the budget now reflects what money was used over last year in expenditure. The lines in the budget are such that there are no cuts in there, and I've been interested to have a conversation with him outside the meeting. I forecasted to my colleagues behind me when we discussed the budget that he would be having a venge his anger to government and also to his county council, as he referred. There is nothing in this budget that he can't go and criticise. There is money there which has been prudently set aside and carry forward to meet the next 10 years of our financial strategy. There is a table within the agenda, Chairman, which quite clearly states how the district will perform should we carry on at the same pace as we are now. And that is taking the worst possible view of the economic growth. That is the business rates that he refers to has not even factored in yet, because we yet don't know the full extent and the criteria that will be used for us to retain the business rate. There's lots of unknown there. So we've taken the worst possible view on how the economy is going to grow, and yet we'll be making a surplus by 2025. So therefore, I do praise him for voting with us on the budget, I hope. And, also, it's been said, officers have done a sterling job of looking after our money, and it's great if we could all support this budget and have a unanimous vote on it, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, I'll hand over to the Chief Executive Officer for the name vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just remind members that as there is an amendment to the vote, printed, which is on page 20, recommendation to Council, this means that this will be a decision in principle which will become live if it's not called to the Cabinet within 5 working days. So just as a point of the in terms of the procedural, the amendment which was given and which was accepted is as part, and on the recommendation will become C as part of the on page as per page 20. So on page 20 you've got little 1, little 2. Little 2 has A, B, and the C, which was as per that circulated by Councillor Fowler and accepted by and taken in by the leader in his statement, becomes part of the substantive motion on there. I will now, as in accordance with the requirements of the law, to read out the budget is always a named vote, and therefore I will now read out each name. Could you please clearly state whether you're for, against or abstain when I read your name out? Thank you. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Amos. Councillor Baker. Councillor Bennison. Councillor Bray. Councillor B.E. Brown. Councillor M. Brown. Councillor Buke. Councillor Callender. Councillor Calver. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chittock. Councillor Coley. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Davis. Councillor Everett. Councillor Fairley. Councillor Fowler. Councillor Griffiths. Councillor G. Guglielmi. Councillor V. Guglielmi. Councillor Heaney. Councillor I. Henderson. Councillor J. Henderson. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Honeywood. Councillor Khan. Councillor Land. Councillor Massey. Apologies. Councillor McWilliams. Councillor Miles. Councillor Newton. Councillor Nichols. Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Platt.
For.
Councillor Poonian. Councillor Porter. Councillor Raby. Councillor Scott. Councillor M.J. Skeels Jr. Councillor M.J. D. Skeels Sr. Councillor Steady. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Stock. Councillor Talbot. Councillor Turner. Councillor Watson. Councillor White. Councillor Whitmore. Councillor Winfield. And Councillor Yallop. Thank you.
No.
Chairman, can I have a point of order, please? Clarification.
Yeah.
I didn't notice Councillor Watlin's name mentioned. Is he not on the list now?
The Councillor Watling's not here, so I didn't read out his name. Thank you, Chair. Chairman, the vote was 48 for, 1 against, 1 abstention, 9 not present. Thank you.
Can I just say again? I mean, I think this is the second meeting I've been to, and I think it's a bit discourteous to this council that we've not even had an apology from Councillor Watling for not being here. Did he receive an apology for him for tonight? Because it hasn't been read out at any meeting. It just seems a bit disgraceful that he can't even give this council that courtesy of an apology.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Your comments are noted. Item number 10, urgent matters for debate. There are none. Next scheduled meeting of this council, Tuesday the 27th of March. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Please be upstanding.